Fitness Movement is brought to you by Zor Fitness. We offer coaching and individualized program design, as well as educational content for coaches and athletes. It's all one place, zorfitness.com.
All right, we're going to talk about athletes' feedback. So basically, Chris and I are individual design coaches. So our athletes are executing on a program that we write for them. And by the nature of individual design, you continue to build the program off the feedback the athlete gives you. So if they say things are feeling really good, things went really well, we're going to progress it a certain way. If they say it feels awful and it didn't go well, we're probably going to adjust course. If they get injured, we adjust course, which doesn't happen for other programs. Like if you have a PDF program, you download the 8 weeks and you do it regardless of where you're at and how you feel, which is obviously one of the big benefits of individual design. However, in order to get the best program possible, then you need to have the best feedback and communication possible with your coach. Typically, I will rate for my clients 1 week of training at a time. So they're doing a week of training. I'm looking back at what happened the previous week and what they've done up to this point to write out their next week. Is that how you do it, or is it different than that?
No, that's how I do it. I mean, I think we've talked about it on other episodes, but our general is like you write a skeleton or a template, and then from there, the specifics get entered week to week. I've done it, I think, for simpler programs, like not program design clients, but like people are like, hey, can you write me something so I can get in the gym? Fully knowing they're not going to go to the gym anyways. Like I'll write out.
You're like, I'm not going to spend that much time on this.
Yeah, it's like, come on, bro. I know you're not going. I might do more, but the reason why I go a week at a time, and I think you're the same way, is exactly what you talked about. It's like, I could write up 2 months of workouts, and it's like, this makes perfect sense in a vacuum, right? But it's like, what happens if you get a couple of nights of bad sleep, or work is super stressful and you got to take 2 days off and now your progression is off, or, you tweak something and we got to redo, a progression and shorten the range of motion or whatever, or change something. It's like, you could write out a full 12-week cycle and then like literally have nothing that looks the same at the end of the 12 weeks. And it's like, it doesn't make any sense. If you're going to be actually in tune with your athletes, then it's like you almost have to go week by week. I mean, I'm sure there's little nuances you could do differently, but yeah, I do it the same way.
Or less, I guess, is the other option.
Right.
Like go in there and do, rest day to rest day, and you program 3 to 4 days at a shot.
I mean, that's like you see like old school like videos of Rich Froning, like where it's like he knew what he wanted to do going into the day, but he would just like change it every day based on how he felt, what he did the day before, what progressions they were following. But like that's like just not feasible for some people, for most people, and
also not necessary for a lot of people,
right?
Like somebody like Rich back in the day, he's doing so much of so many different things that like who knows how you're going to feel after going through this variety mishmash of metcons that he's doing on a particular Tuesday. Like it's hard to predict, whereas like I think most people that we're working with, their programs are a little more static in the fact that there's not so many moving pieces that it becomes hard to predict their performance, because you always want to like have them at their best at any given point to at least execute the work as well as they're able to do on a given day. Like you don't want them to come in and feel like trash and then have some really important thing that they need to do. Like, yes, you need to be training enough where you move the needle forward. You're not always going to feel like 100%, but generally you want them to feel fresh. So no, I think that fairly quick turnaround is important for probably any coaching of high-level athletes, but I think especially in CrossFit with the number of moving parts, it's really it's helpful for the coach to have just a little bit less of like a trajectory. Like you still know where you want to go with things, but actually isn't built out super far in advance.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think all that being said, like our point of this conversation is to like say like, hey, if you're one of our athletes, it's important for you to know that feedback loop is pretty short intentionally, because we want your feedback and we need your feedback to build out a good program. So if you don't give us the right things back, you're not going to get great inputs simply because we don't have a great picture of where you're actually at.
Mm-hmm.
So part of it is on our side of things, and our job is to say, like, we need this or that from you. Like, okay, we want these certain things filmed. We want to know what your exertion level was on this. We want to know how many reps you did or what your scores and times were. So that's maybe like the first thing is like metrics. So what specific metrics do you want from your athletes when they're doing CrossFit training?
So casting a wide paintbrush, like I want weight results, right, for the lifts. And I know that's like, well, duh, why wouldn't you do that? You'd be surprised, like how many in True Coach just green check marks I get where it's like, all right, well, I'm glad you did it, but like I'm actually planning on working the next 3 weeks off of the weight you hit today. So if you could tell me what that is, that'd be great. So that's the first thing is like, all right, weights lifted. The other thing is specific.
I'm going to interrupt you quick. So like True Coach, one of the things that like you're going through and you're marking down your results as you go through your session, essentially.
Yeah.
So it's very easy to give feedback. It's extremely easy.
There is,
and
Ben,
good.
It could not be easy, right? The only way it could be easier is if I'm sitting next to you writing it myself.
holding their hand.
Yeah, because it's like to do your workout, you have to go into your app to see what you're doing. And so it's like, I'm already there. And so, listen, if someone was short on time, so they didn't give me a ton of feedback, like, although that's like annoying, like I can at least wrap my head around that. It's hard for me to wrap my head around, like, you couldn't type 135. Like you were so pressed for time that you couldn't with your thumb type 135 under the lift. Like, so weights, that's for sure. I like videos. I think some people can go a little overboard with videos. Like if I write up 8 sets of something, I don't necessarily need to see all 8 sets, you know?
Yeah, and honestly, like I think people do that thinking like, oh man, my coach is going to look at all these. Like probably not, first of all. Like if you send 8 of the same thing, you might scrub through and like watch a couple and like see if they're all looking the same or not. And if for some reason something's like really going wrong, okay, maybe you get a bunch of videos of the same thing. But generally that's not necessary. Right? Mm-hmm. Like if you're an athlete, if your movement should be pretty consistent. And if it's not, then maybe you just haven't had enough time in whatever you're doing to just actually like refine it. But most of the time, if that's the case, like, yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe they just think you're watching every single second of every single video that you input at that point. And it's like, that's not the case. I don't know any coach who is at like a professional level who would do that because they wouldn't have the time to.
Right.
So maybe that's bursting somebody's bubble out there, but I also think that like what the coach is doing is they're trying to sift through the information at that point, which again is maybe that's the cutoff. Maybe is like how much is too little. It's like the coach doesn't have what's necessary, like the information necessary to actually program the next week effectively. Right. Like they don't have your scores, they don't have your time, so they're just kind of blind as they go to write your next week. Whereas too much, now your coach is having to sift through and decipher what information there is most important that they should be looking at and what they can kind of skip over. Mm-hmm. Where at that point, obviously that's not going to be ideal either because they might skip over something that's actually important. And again, I don't think that the abundance of feedback is super common, but I think maybe we each have like an athlete that might deal with that.
Yeah. And then, I mean, the other stuff is like you said, weights, times, some videos and movements. Those are some of the most important ones. I mean, I'll get some feedback on like, this felt really good, or I felt really good doing X today. And I love hearing that stuff. But if I was to look at bare bones, I would say the stuff that you mentioned. And then I would also say like, if anything's bothering you, like anything like, oh, we're doing this and this bothers my shoulder. I can't tell you how many times I've been programming stuff and like not getting results. And I'm like assuming everything's fine and going through a progression. It's like, yeah, I haven't done any of the bar muscle up work the last couple of weeks. My shoulder's been really bothering me. It's like, why didn't you think to bring that up? Like I would have stopped programming that 4 weeks ago. Like, yeah. So that I would say that's the other thing.
Yeah, and there's certain things that warrant like a more urgent form of communication. Like, I don't know if you are texting clients or it's exclusively through True Coach, but like even if there's like the separate spot where you can just like message your coach and it's not related to the feedback in the workout. Like if you got injured or you tweak something or you're slept so poorly that like you're skipping your training or something, like
Yeah.
you need to let your coach know that.
Right.
So like those are things that are extremely important, and yeah, you need to be as quick as possible about letting your coach know what's going on with that.
And I think you kind of said it, Ben. It's like, if I'm going to pay X number of dollars a month for an individual coach, right? The benefit of that is having that, is the ability to provide feedback and get instant adjustments, the ability to have a program that's specifically geared around you, your goals, and what works for you. And it's like, if you're not going to provide the feedback, frankly, you lose out on a lot of the value you get from hiring a coach, right? Like, yes. From a programming perspective, there's other things that come with it. But if we were to look at just from the program, the X's and O's, the sets and reps, it's like, dude, if you're not going to talk to me and provide me feedback so I can make adjustments, like, we might as well just do a template. Like, it's pretty much the same, you're operating on the fly.
It actually very much becomes that.
Yeah.
It's like, if you're writing, we talked about this the other week. It was like, if you're writing a group program, it runs through the avatar and you assume the person's healthy. You assume all these things because you don't know.
Right.
And that's exactly what you do if you don't get any feedback. Which
yes.
We've both had clients who, for months on end, will continue to pay us and we'll continue to write programs for them because that's what they're paying us to do, who really don't give hardly any feedback. And that's, I think both of us has become a little bit less emotional about that.
Yeah.
But it's just sort of like, it's frustrating, but then also like the reality is like, you're paying us to do this. You've hired us to do a certain thing. We're going to do that thing the best that we can. It's just the reality is like the quality of that with you giving us no feedback is going to be, I don't want to say poor, but maybe a notch above that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll also say like some things around just like generally maybe how you're feeling in a session, like your mindset or like energy levels or things like that can also be very helpful.
Sure.
Especially if it's not like this paragraph of like a journal entry of like, everything that's you venting about everything that's going on in your life. Again, if it's not overload where the coach is having to sift through it, it's like, hey, energy was a little low in this PM session today. Felt better as I got warmed up into my working sets, right? Something as simple as that gives us like this picture of like, okay, this is how they're feeling at the start of this session. And like, it sounds like things improved. And then we can also like see that like week over week, consistently in their Tuesday PM session, their energy seems to be a little bit low. Well, let's just make that a lower session. Like we don't need to try to push intensity there.
Or you can even explore like why that is.
Also super, super helpful.
Well, sorry, what I was even saying was like, you could even then explore why that is, right? Like, again, everything could look really good on paper, but then if you're like, man, for the last 3 weeks, you've told me your energy is really low in your Tuesday PM session. Why do you think that is, right? Like, and then maybe, because a lot of people don't realize, and this is not unique to the people we deal with, but just in general, people just start going throughout their days and they don't stop to think like things might have changed or whatever. And if you get that feedback consistently, and then you as a good coach can be like, hey, I've noticed this. Why do you think it is? And the next thing you know, they're like, oh, you know what? My work hours did change, right? Like I actually have to get up earlier on Mondays than I have previously, or Tuesdays. And it's like, oh, okay, that's news. We should probably adjust how we program on that day, or, you know what I mean? Yeah. Or maybe you create a progression. It's really good, right? They got to work on X. And so you put it on a Monday, you want it to be fresh first thing, but maybe because it's a new skill or an underdeveloped energy system, they come into the next day fatigued. And so then you have to adjust and be like, okay, like this is fatiguing them more than I thought it would. So then that Tuesday has to be a lighter session or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. I guess bottom line is it's important for people to know that like anything that you put as feedback is opportunities for the coach to then use that to adjust the program moving forward and in a way that can make it appropriate. So if you don't provide the feedback, they can't adjust it in a way that makes it appropriate.
Yeah.
And then also there's going to be things outside of just sets and reps that impact your performance week over week. And we need to know those things as well. So life changes, energy, sleep, mood, and some of that stuff are things that, I know Chris and Dave both track, metrics off athletes for certain things that are important to track. And that might be more of an objective look, and that's also going to be important for athlete feedback. So
yeah, agreed.
Should I get off my soapbox now, or is there anything else we should mention?
No, I think that's good. I think the last thing we could end on is just, kind of a shout out to our athletes or anyone looking to get a coach is like, guys, please just put something in there, right? Like give me something. There's, like I said, we've gotten to the point in our careers where we've learned to not get emotionally tied. If you're not going to be super serious about your goals, like I can't be more serious about them than you are. But with that being said, it's like, it is disheartening as a coach and frustrating to be like, man, I don't even know if what I'm doing is valid. I have no idea if what I'm writing down is even good. So I would just tell people, like, do yourself a favor, do us a favor, and like put your feedback into your program so we can continue getting you to your goals.
Yeah. Also, like, we've talked about this before. Right? Again, if you're a professional coach, you're not waiting until Sunday to write all your programs.
Right.
Right? Again, professional coaches, they have more clients. They do a better job with their clients. They have put guardrails in place to safekeep their life outside of coaching and their life inside of coaching. My point being, like, if you have one client that's kind of recreational, you can write their program on Sunday night and it will be fine.
Yeah.
That's not going to work for having a roster of athletes who are much more serious about their goals and have much more training to do.
Mm-hmm.
So what that means is that your coach is writing your program throughout the week. So if you always input all of your feedback on Sunday night, your coach might have written your program on Wednesday morning.
Yeah.
And they didn't get to see any of your feedback from Monday or Tuesday because they wrote it on Wednesday. So ideally, you have this practice of, I did my session. Part of like my wrap up to my session, or at least like the wrap up to my day, is entering my feedback for my coach.
Mm-hmm.
And that way, it's not just like a bunch of blank cells that will eventually get filled in, but with the at some point from the coach or some point from the athlete, and then the coach has to kind of look back to see what it was previously. So that's just like a good reminder for athletes to like keep the feedback loop as short as you can by entering your results within reasonable amount of time after you get done with your session. I would say like at some point during the next 24 hours before you get done. Ideally before the end of day would probably be best.
Yeah.
Sweet. Yeah. I mean, I think this will be a helpful resource for us to send out to athletes as just a reminder, like, to, you're paying us to uphold one end of the bargain, but it's also reliant on you doing a good job of giving us what we need.
Yep.
Sweet. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Ben.